Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Solo Sessions. I'm your host, Ben Kanute, and I'm here to talk to you today about a little bit of everything, maybe a little bit of nothing. We're just out here rambling on, and I guess this episode passed the first couple world championships, the Ironman world championships that just happened with Kona and Nice. We got through Wollongong last weekend, which was some great racing for short course for the grand final. And next up is 70.3 world champs. And that has been my big goal since missing the cut in Frankfurt, and always actually since the beginning of the season. 70.3 worlds was one of my biggest goals, aside from the Ironman World Championships, but sometimes you have to pivot. And I think this episode would probably be pretty good to just go over, where am I at? What's going on? What was going on at the beginning of the year? How maybe training has changed? What are we focusing on? Some of the theories behind why we were doing stuff. So you've probably caught on to some of it. I've maybe talked about a little bit of the reason for the race block and those sorts of things, but going to kind of take a step back and look at everything overall. And not going to lie, right now I'm in a bit of the training fog. If you were to talk to me a couple days ago, I was riding high, riding that roller coaster, things clicking and everything, and things are still clicking. The body's doing what I tell it to do, and that is a very special thing. I feel like Neil can throw just about anything at me, and I'm ready, willing, and able to go out and execute. But, sometimes the clouds roll in, it gets a little bit cooler out, and you get that little bit of extra fatigue that's going on in there, and it just gets tough sometimes. Still hitting everything, still feel like I'm super fit, but just getting towards the end of the main block of training. So I think that fatigue, training fog, whatever can just kind of hit you. And got to be aware too, because life comes at you and there's always a lot of different things going on, whether it's business wise, family wise, whatever. The stress is stress. So you also have to pay attention to that. And that's something, juggling as well. But really feel like I've been nailing sleep, nutrition, in and out of training, and getting the recovery in. So body has been bouncing back really well. At the end of this block, obviously, you try and hold it together and get yourself to the start line ready. But speaking of sleep, like I said, things have been firing. I've been super focused. I've been trying to accomplish quite a bit between training, getting the body ready. And so just the mind, everything has been thinking about this race and trying to weigh different decisions, whether, how to make the bike a little lighter, make myself a little lighter. What do I need for going out to Marbella and then straight into an Ironman in Phoenix? So getting all of those little pieces, like how am I going to travel with all my nutrition, bottles, all of that. So this is one of the bigger trips that I've had. But like I said, there's a lot of focus and mental energy going into this, and it starts to creep into my dreams a little bit. And I feel like that's always a good sign. It shows that your focus is in the right place. You are imagining different scenarios, and I don't really put a lot of weight behind the dreams, but I have a couple that just really stood out that I found kind of interesting, that both had good and bad things. The first one happened probably a few weeks ago, and it was, in my mind, I feel like a Ironman Chattanooga situation. Like I was racing that, and I guess I basically jumped and put me in on the bike, and I was leading the bike with like one other person, and I, for whatever reason, was not running well, or was not going to run, was going to choose not to go after. It was just going to end after the bike. No idea why. That's just what was in my head. But I was doing so well on the bike that I figured, I'll just go out and get a training run in. If I make it a lap or two, or however far into the race and have to pull out, like no big deal, wasn't planning on making it this far. Well, I get into T2, which for some reason is in a building somewhere, and I guess all the pros bags, it's like in this semicircle of chairs, and they're all like, they give us numbers, and so you get bag numbers and stuff. And with pros, you can slap it on the backpack. It makes it a little bit easier to find your stuff, but my bag was nowhere to be seen. And in the dream, it felt like 8 to 10 minutes of searching around, couldn't find it, going around like worst case nightmare scenario, like you can't do it. And I guess in there wasn't going to do it anyways, go out and run. But, you never want to be stuck there. That's always, I feel like my fear is forgetting something or getting there and being like, oh my gosh, I don't have my bike shoes on my bike, or my one running shoe is missing. And actually, I think I just saw this happen to Bart Arnault, like the Belgian racer. I think he was at a race and his helmet was just gone. Somebody took it. And I think he took that person's helmet then to get out on it because it just wasn't there. Anyways, a pretty rare thing to happen overall, but I'm in there looking around. Apparently I found my spare bag with like a pair of shoes. And I think then I was kind of like, well, what am I doing? Because there's no point in going out. I wasn't going to run anyways. So why am I going to go out? And I think I maybe went out to go start, but then the dream just kind of ends. So there's that. And it's a little bit like the being late for school or forgetting you have a school assignment. But the second one is interesting. It comes a few days ago, and it transports me to the energy lab in Kona, and I'm running, and I'm in second place, I believe. Patrick Lang is winning the race. I don't know why. I mean, well, I was there racing him, racing in air quotes. I was participating at that point on the run as he's flying through. So I have a pretty clear mental image of Patrick running through the energy lab because of this one little out and back that I just caught him at before, he went on to win the race. So that is kind of in my mind. There were ice vests involved. I think he might have had one. I was shoving ice in. I was going through the aid stations. There was a lot of cooling. So maybe that's coming from all of the heat prep talk and the keeping the body cool. But I was running super well. And I could tell that Patrick was he was fading. He was overcome by the heat, which again, rare for Patrick. The dude is an animal in the heat. But I make the pass, or we're running side by side even. And I was like, this is nuts. Like, I'm winning Kona right now, or leading with Patrick. And then the dream shifts, and for some reason, then as we're coming out of the energy lab, we like switch and we're on bikes and then in the middle of a city, and we're trying to dodge through different people and everything to try and get to the finish line first. And it devolved into a little bit of chaos there. But I like to link a little bit. Patrick, one of the best runners in the sport. My run has really been coming up, been getting a lot of confidence in it. So I feel like some of these dreams, good cycling, good running, definitely some weird mishaps, but that's dreams for you. So I don't know if there's anybody out there who is into interpreting dreams, but those are kind of the couple that have come up. And I don't know, I'm sure that there will be more. I feel like also when you're taking magnesium, I've been on and off of it. Like, I try and take it as much as possible, and have for the past few years. When you run out, sometimes there's stretches where I go without it, but I feel like magnesium can give you some pretty wild and crazy dreams as well, like some pretty vivid ones. So maybe that's some of the kind of reasons behind having it, but just thought those were kind of interesting. They kind of followed, because when you're hitting your workouts, and there's a feeling that you get when you're ready. And this is, I think I'm going to try and articulate this, because for the past couple years, I've gone in and out of feeling super confident, racing, having a solid or a good race here or there, and then also just being completely shocked and surprised by the result that I get, how my body feels, and all of that sort of thing. So definitely there's a roller coaster that goes, but I think when you're training and you've been doing it a long time, there's two different things. One, when you're not feeling as good and you're trying to get through the workouts and just stack days and build the consistency, you kind of tell yourself, I'm good, I'm doing what's right, I'm hitting all the workouts, like I am fit, and I'm going to be ready for, the first few races of the season, or I'm building back up for the middle, whatever it is. You might be grinding through it a little bit. But in your self-talk, you're telling yourself that this is it, this is status quo, I'm feeling good, all of that. And then things start to click, whether, a few weeks, months, whatever it is. And there's just this shift that happens where it's not so forced anymore. You're able to hit the workouts, and it truly feels like one, you've progressed your fitness because you've seen, like, for example, your bike, your FTP, you've seen that go up. Or all of a sudden, if you haven't tested that in a while, these workouts start to be like, it's way too easy. My heart rate's super low. The power's coming easy, and I know that it should be higher. And you can maybe talk with your coach, and you can look at heart rate versus power to bump it up, or do another test, or whatever the process is that you're going to do. And you bump it up and you still keep hitting the workouts. So you're staying within yourself, but you're moving faster, pushing more power, and all of those good things. And sometimes it's just hard to put a finger on why things click. And I've been thinking a lot about this lately. I think because one, I had the shift in coaches at the end of last year to this year. There's kind of a difference in philosophy a little bit between training. I guess like basic physiology is like always there. And I think that there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat. Like every single professional out there is working hard in some capacity. But I think the biggest balance too is just how do you rate your training stress, and what is that toll on your body? Like, how are you as an individual or a coach looking at the athlete and saying, okay, this is the stress that I'm putting on them with the training. And then how do we also consider all of the other stresses in life? This seems a little random, but I think I'm going somewhere with this. So I think when you're taking a look, you have to be really realistic about the stresses of what the training is. So my training now versus when with Neil versus with Jim, like, I've had with Neil, it's still early. I know that I'm gaining fitness. I've got podiums with Neil. I believe in his training, or I wouldn't be with him. Jim, I've had a storied career with him. I had a lot of good results. So this is not a knock on any person or philosophy. You just need changes sometimes. But when I'm comparing and looking at recent years and everything, I also look back, like Training Peaks has some great, when you follow the CTL, ATL, acute training load, cumulative training load, and just different TSS scores, all of that. It's very interesting because, and I've talked about this in one form or another on social media, YouTube, maybe the podcast, but I was always chasing a carrot when I was training with Jim, just because we looked at the demands of the race, and this is just as much my decision as it was Jim's. But we were looking at what the demands were and what we wanted to hold in a 70.3 or an Ironman, and jumping straight into that at the beginning of the year. Eventually your fitness catches up. It's not an easy way to do it, because some of those first workouts, if you aren't true to yourself and where your fitness is at, they're going to hurt really bad. And eventually, like you look back at 2022, where I was second at the world champs, like eventually, our goal was like 350 watts, kind of based around there. I could, by the end of that year, hold that fairly well. If you took me back a few months before that race, that was a huge struggle, but we were still trying to progress that. And we fractionalized it a lot instead of bringing the wattage down. Now I feel like with some testing, we create, those zones a little bit more specifically, and you're capped a lot earlier regardless of that. One of the things that has helped me with that too is that I'm at altitude, and I can give myself a little bit of grace because I haven't trained for this long at altitude. So all of that kind of to say, like if I'm chasing the carrot for a couple years, there's a lot of stress there. Maybe some stress with not performing, got to run the business side. There's a lot of family stress. Then I change everything at the end of last year. And so the beginning of this year, I have all of these different outside stressors with trying to get fit, maybe missing some of the bulk of the base training through the winter, and didn't quite play catch up. Did a lot of good training. Definitely didn't click like it did now, but I look back at my cumulative training load and my CTLs or ATLs, like all of that. And I'm doing the most I have all year. Like, let's just look right around Texas or back in May. I mean, my peak CTL didn't really hit 100 until, just scrolling through fast, I hit 101 like in August, and that's pretty much past Frankfurt. Maybe it hit it right at Frankfurt or right after. And then, I start to build up. I think before Oceanside, I got maybe a little bit close to 100 as well. But that's not a heavy training load. But I think there were heavy stressors outside. And so you see that, and you see that yourself, you're playing catch up through most of the year. But with how I place the races, my ambitious racing schedule, with all of that, which I believe I've talked about in a previous podcast, coming out of Frankfurt, kind of in the first couple episodes, it didn't allow myself to get that consistency to then build up all of the resilience in the muscles plus the cardiovascular and aerobic fitness that I needed. What I'm seeing now is based on resting heart rate, HRV, my RPE in workouts, my power, my heart rate versus power, my heart rate versus pace, all of those metrics. So it's not just one. I'm not just using one, but in using all of them and just even how I feel in them, things flow a lot more. And I think it's hard to put a finger on exactly just one thing for why that's happening. However, I think, since Frankfurt, there was not as much rushing. I did pick a racing block in September, kind of late August, early September, through all the way September, to focus and try and just execute. Go out to these different races, kind of race yourself into shape a little bit, but also just continually build between them. And I've kind of found that works for me in some ways, where like the first race of the season feels really like I like a good rust buster, because then when I get back into training, a lot of those numbers start to feel a bit easier. It's almost like you break through a little bit of a mental wall from what you were doing after you give yourself a little bit of rest, a really hard effort, then you just recover, then you get back into training, and it's like, okay, I feel adaptations. And that's what I think we've done really, really well since Frankfurt, is just slowly increasing the load and the progressions, balancing the races, and using those as another stimulus. And I've just been able, it's like the first one was Louisville, then I went to Santa Cruz, and then Augusta. And in my opinion, and I think that this is supported in some of the scientific literature and just in talking with different coaches and athletes, like I think a lot of what you do isn't shown until 2 weeks later. So let's say you put together a training block that 2 weeks later, like a run workout that you might have done 2 weeks prior, you start to see that type of fitness in the races from like the work that's stacked up. So I felt like through that racing block, I had a bit of delayed exposure of my fitness. And I think that kind of holds true, and it kind of goes with when you do a true world championship taper, you're kind of starting that week and a half, 2 weeks out. I talked about this in the last episode, where like tips for taper, you're not going to get more fit in that final week. Really, even that last week and a half or so, you might put a finishing touch. You're doing most of it for confidence levels and trying to have that confidence to sit back and not have to prove fitness to yourself. Just know that through that body of work, you're ready to go. Now I feel like truly I can sit back, take a look at this body of work, and say, okay, I'm ready to go. Now I still have about a week-ish left before I can really sit back. I mean, really, it's only a few more days. Saturday of this week, I'm recording this Thursday. I'll probably go out tomorrow morning. I'll have like one more really solid workout before I bet we start scaling it back. So that's where, I think is kind of like the Spark Notes version of my, call it mental gymnastics or whatever it is, for why I feel like finally I'm training and racing a bit like myself. Well, I guess not racing. Well, it's soon to be seen if I'm racing like myself. However, day in, day out, when you can go and execute a workout without digging a hole or feeling like, oh, this is way above my head, I feel like that's a really good indication. Because earlier in the year, I felt like I was searching almost to like exceed or transcend my training, which I think is always a good goal to try and have. Give yourself that space to do that. But when you feel like you need to do that to really execute well, that puts you in a tricky spot because it leads to potentially overdoing it during the race and blowing up. Now I feel like if I can just go out and execute what I've been doing day in, day out, which I should be able to do because of, the past few weeks of training where I've proven that, then I feel like I can still be competitive. Will I like to try and push it and take some risk? Of course, that's part of racing. But that I think is just, it's kind of like the intangible. You just kind of know when things click. And I think it really is so different each training cycle, each person. Like you can't just copy and paste the same thing because there's so many different things that go in. And obviously there's no such thing as a perfect prep. Now that being said, I got to say I'm pretty psyched with some of the workouts that I've, kind of put together. I'll try and, give some examples because I think I really next week I want to give a big kind of look into what the Marbella course has, maybe how I think a professional would approach it, like not give away all of my secrets for exactly how I'm racing it, but kind of figure out like the pro dynamics or how I would break apart that course, as well as maybe some tips for the age groupers for, hey, if you're going to Marbella, this is what I would do if I were in your shoes, or maybe how I would pace it if we didn't have all of these kind of different racing dynamics. But in the training, obviously, we're thinking about this a lot more. And one of the main things we've focused on this year that's carried into this block is a lot more, I guess, working not as much on my steady state power. I've probably worked on my steady state power for the past 5 years. That's how middle and long course racing have traditionally always been looked at, because the fastest way to get from point A to point B on your own is to just hit it steady. Don't go too much over your pace. Don't go too far under it, and get to that finish line, in the most efficient and fastest way possible. However, with race dynamics, especially with bigger fields, bigger packs on the bike, running shoulder to shoulder a lot more, there's going to be a lot more fluctuations in power and pace. I think in the last couple years, as I got away from Olympic style racing and fully focused on half and long distance racing, I lost a lot of the variability in my power and pacing. And that's something I always had to have a concentrated focus on, because in those ITU crit races, those high power spikes always, wreaked havoc on running. Like it does for anybody, and some people absorb it better than others, but I had to make sure I was really resilient in that. So in a lot of the bike sets, I feel like I'm doing more stuff that's either over threshold than under threshold, or up towards VO2 and then recover, and just a lot of those, whatever, 30 10s or 30 15s, 40 20s, 30 30s, just those types of efforts, but over an extended period of time in multiple sets. And then obviously with the shift from, focusing on the Ironman World Champs to 70.3, there's a lot more threshold type running, high tempo, low threshold running, because you need faster paces overall. And I just feel like Neil's philosophy, what I've picked up on, what we've kind of talked about, is always keeping the powder dry. Don't always dig that hole. And I think a lot of times throughout the years, I went back, or I would look back and look at these workouts and just go, man, I was trying to prove to myself that I could go harder, instead of being content with where I was at and knowing, just telling myself, you could go harder, but what's the point right now? Don't dig yourself a hole. Give yourself another day to recover and hit that next workout even a little bit better. And with that, like I know even when I was working with Jim, when I'm really firing and I'm in the right zones and everything, I feel like I absorb things really well and my body adapts really quickly. And that's what I really feel like right now in my training block. I can go from doing, like the other week, I did a O2 supported session. I've talked about this again, talking about a lot of things I've talked about, but O2 supported session with Neil in his lab on the bike doing, VO2 efforts. And then just absolutely like each set kind of going better and better, kind of starting off almost feeling like, and this was just like, I think the coolest thing about it was you just start to get a feel for your fitness and how things, should quote unquote feel. I'm a big proponent in don't judge things before you get started. Try not to guess how something is going to feel, but like there's a primer at the beginning of the workout, right at about threshold. So at, or a little under threshold. So, I was, supposed to push about 5 minutes at about 340, 350, something like that. So not a crazy long amount of time. I always feel like those openers feel awful. They don't always feel great, and they're supposed to, so that when you start the workout, you kind of flush that out. You're priming the system, priming the pump. You're warming up the car. And whenever I hear that, like warming up a machine, I just think back to Doug Freeman. He was an Olympic athlete. He was alternate to the Olympic team a couple Olympic cycles back in the earlier to mid 2000s. And he trained quite a bit and was a coach on the club team when I was in college. And he was around. I did some training with him too. Dude's an animal. But his famous saying was, "You don't warm up a lawnmower." In reference to him doing a swim warm up after he had, retired and was just joining us. So that was funny. But anyways, 5 minutes. I got to get him on the podcast here. I know this is solo sessions, just me, but he's a cool guy. I would totally have a fun conversation with him. So maybe someday. But anyways, did the warm up, but like, you start off, you don't feel good, and then you just expect, okay, like this not good feeling, be prepared for it to just feel just as bad throughout this entire 5 minutes, and maybe the power stays the same or goes down a little bit. You could see I was a bit tentative because it's on the screen, and it's got like the little graph. You could see it kind of being tentative right there, but then it just gets stronger throughout the 5 minutes because I started to feel better. That O2 really kicks in, and I was like, oh, this is what sea level is like, because at altitude your body goes anaerobic, or all your zones are just pushed down a level where you just start to feel it a bit more. Your aerobic levels you can't access as much of them. So then going into the VO2 short interval, short rest, I started off the first set hitting what he wanted, then I pushed it a little, and then a little bit more to just, get that extra quality out of it without digging a hole, and was pretty pumped about that. Ran an hour off the bike, just kind of cruisy, but just a really good accumulation day. And then off the back of that, go into a swim workout at the Julie Dibbins crew, which has been really awesome to have a crew like that around. You just get some good back and forth. And honestly, like I show up to the pool sometimes. I had to do 5K on my own. My alarm I set it wrong. I was supposed to be at a Julie swim this morning, and the time changes. Tuesdays are a little bit later. Thursdays are a little bit earlier, and I set it for the Tuesday swim, not the Thursday. So I had to do 5K on my own, and I'm pretty motivated right now, so I can rip it off, and it's not as bad when you're fit, because there's just a different feeling when you're fit and being able to push yourself. It's fun. Your body almost craves it. Like it's just way easier because you build up, I think, for two reasons. And I know science behind this. I've seen either Steve Magnus or Brad Stolberg talk about it on their Instagrams, and just become more physically fit. So for a given effort, the pace, speed, whatever, doesn't feel as bad. But then also your body just gets used to doing this sort of thing. It's like sitting in a cold plunge or a sauna every single day, and your body adapts to that stimulus. And so it gets easier for a certain temperature. That is where, again, another indicator that I feel like things are moving well, because going hard almost feels good in like a weird, sick and twisted sort of way. So I just, sometimes when I'm tapering and you feel a little lazy or feel like, oh, it's gonna, but I just feel like my it's craving it. Like I crave that intensity or race intensity. Cause I guess Ironman is not quite intensity for the taper week. But you almost crave your body being able to do that because it's so used to it. So I lost. Oh yeah, the swim. You show up and it's cold now here in Denver, Boulder, Loveland, wherever you want to put yourself on the front range. The mornings are in the 40s. The pool is outside. It's going to be outside all winter long. The temperature itself in the pool is about 80, so not bad, but the outside is cold. And so you're standing there on the pool deck and it forces you to jump in when you don't want to. And we were given a long set. It was 4100s. I think there was a break after every 10. And it was just playing around with different intervals. It was starting on like the 130, going down to the 115. So it was like 30, 130, 25, 20, 15, mixing up how many you do. Like it was 4, 3, 2, 1 of each interval. Then the 4 just kind of moved down. It was like 1, 4, 3, 2, 1 or 2, 1, 4, 3. So all the way through like 4 sets of that. And, those intervals for me in a short course meter pool, even if the pool is a little slow, it's just very cruisy, I guess. Like, I swam basically 115s or a little faster, 113s, and would kind of descend it down to like a 109, 110 for the 115 pace just to kind of make it, because that was the whole goal of the set, basically aerobic. And in my mind, I was like, great, I'm going to get 5K. It'll be aerobic, and this is good. I'm not going to dig a hole at all today. There's no real racing. Just kind of lock this up and move on to the next day. Get ready for the solid weekend that you have. But at the end of that set, we finished it pretty quickly, had quite a bit of time left, and I was like, oh, great. Again, I get to get out early, and this is fantastic. Like, yeah, I get to move on with my day. It's nothing better than knocking off 5K, in about an hour and change and being done. But Julie had a different plan. She said we made it look too easy. So she told us to put on our fins, and we ended up doing 10 100s, kind of a VO2 set where it's like you just 25 fast, 75 easy, and just add another 25 per 100 to get to 100 fast. So it was like 25, 75, 50, 50, 75, 25, 100 all out, 100 easy, do that twice through. And what I really liked was I go from kind of settling. The mental state is I'm relaxing today. It's just aerobic. I don't need to push hard. And that state sometimes, like you're there and able to do the aerobic work very well, and you're able to tick off the box. But if you're looking to go harder, you really have to shift your mindset, because it's almost like you put a governor on yourself. And sometimes I feel like this happens in taper, like, oh, I'm supposed to be resting, so don't go too hard. So that sometimes gets a little bit tough to switch out of. But I really focused in. Like the 25, 50, 75, like I was testing how quick I could go with fins. And fins are kind of fun because I don't usually swim fast in them. We might do some kick in them or some, 25s, that sort of thing to get some speed. But to do 100 all out on, the 120-ish or 125, I forget, the interval is not really that important. It's not something that normally do. And it just gets you feeling fast because you really don't use your legs, or should not, as a triathlete as much. It's not always for speed. It's mainly for balance in the water and to keep your hips up. But I have a halfway decent kick from my high school swim days. So that 100 I honed in on and just flipped the switch and ended up doing like a 56 and 55 per set. So that starts to get down into like, what is that? Like a 49 or a 50, 49, 50, something like that. Maybe 48. If you do like the swimming conversion for it, I think you might just dip under 50 seconds for there if you swim a 55. Because a 106.5 is about a 100 conversion for meters to short course yards. So I was pretty pumped about that. The fact that I had these high quality intervals, and sometimes high intensity really takes it out of me, and I got to recover. even when I was younger, and now I'm older, and recovery takes a little bit more. But those sorts of things where I'm able to double up, I'm feeling really good about. And then each week, just like the progressions, like the past few weeks, my run has gone from doing a few 2 mile tempo repeats to 1 mile repeats the next week to 800s the week after that, and just progressing the pace, obviously, with each of those. Like, tempo is more of like a half marathonish pace, and this is high end tempo, so half marathonish pace at altitude. Then, like with a heart rate cap, mile paces get to be a bit more thresholdy, more towards the top end of threshold by the end of them. And then those 800 repeats also like thresholdish heart rate by the end of them, but way, way faster, because you're starting maybe in the low fives for the tempo, around 500 or under for the mile repeats, and then 430-ish pace or so for the 800s, and just kind of progressing that. And I felt like if I did those 2 mile repeats every week, you'd see that pace get a little bit faster each week. So it's things like that, the bike, I don't know, just everything just kind of coming together and feeling strong. So, I mean, like I had to ask Neil at some point, like, should we bump my threshold up? We had it set, I guess, just full disclosure, around 330-ish for my FTP. And this is just to set the zone for whatever we're doing. It's not like, okay, threshold efforts, straight up we're just doing 5 by 6 minutes or whatever, or 6 by 10 or 7 by 10 Norwegian method, whatever. We do, like I said, a lot of over-unders and variable pacing, because that's just the style of the race, and that's something that I also just need to really improve on and improve my resiliency, on top of, outside of that, doing a lot of base work, zone 2, long rides, just endurance stuff. So those are kind of the two things we've really focused on. And yeah, I'm just sitting there and I'm doing, basically high zone 2 efforts into even like thresholdish, and just text Neil afterwards. I'm like, it kind of feels too easy. Like, I feel like we should be bumping it up. And yeah, sure enough, he bumps it up 15 watts to 345, kind of for the last push into Marbella. And, 345 is nothing special on there. We're talking, and I feel like this is more of a true hour power, and this is also at altitude. So I guess some more mental gymnastics, because comparison is the thief of joy, but it's also a part of sport and a part of improving. And I feel like I try and compare some of my just have like a little piece of me comparing my fitness right now to where I was back in 2022, something like that, for where we thought maybe I was. I think we back in 2022, for example, I think we put my threshold a lot of times at 380-ish for sea level. That's kind of, somewhere between that 360 and 380. We're just kind of where we said, okay, your threshold is probably somewhere around here, which I also think some of my TSS scores, cumulative training load, acute training load, all of those scores were definitely thrown off, because I don't think I was necessarily that high. Maybe I got to that ballpark at my fittest, but I also feel like we overestimated a lot. So some of those scores were obviously lower, because it's based off of what your threshold is in training peaks. Unless you do like a test to estimate it, like, then yeah, it kind of gets a little bit muddled. So I think I was probably a lot more fatigued than I thought I was at certain points of the year. Anyways, 345, I think altitude, it can be anywhere from, I guess, 6 to 10%. I always could just kind of go in the middle. That's about 30 some watts. So 345, like if we're being generous and taking 10%, to make it easy math, at like 35 watts, just over 10%, kind of puts me right around 370. And I still feel like, we err on the safe side for this. So again, it's nothing crazy in comparison to maybe some of the best bikers in the sport, but I feel like it at least puts me in a range of being super fit. So I'm going to end this, because we're starting to get kind of long into here, to saying also that it doesn't really matter what you do in training overall, or how impressive your numbers work. I use what I'm doing. Everything is a confidence builder, and everything is based on science. And I feel very confident saying that with Neil. but everybody's trying to base their stuff on science, and everybody's trying to do the best that they can do to be as fit as possible. However, I will say I am on Instagram, I'm on Strava, and I see certain things and I see certain people's workouts, and I just think it does not matter what other people are doing day to day. Like, first off, don't ever compare yourself to other people in that way, because it's just not healthy, because you don't know what stresses they're under, or if they're super rested, if they're fudging numbers, whatever. But I just find too, like, I've started to just notice a trend of when people post their best workouts, or they post these crazy workouts, and I see what I'm doing and how I can compete. I feel like, you guys should be winning races. If you're posting stuff that's that impressive, like if you're out there pushing, mid 300s for hours on the bike, or you're running, whatever, like 4:15 pace for all your track workouts and that sort of thing, like you should be absolutely annihilating people in the half Ironman distance. But it's never that simple, right? So it's like, maybe that's just what they're super good at. And that's their workout that they can really get after. So again, it's all relative. What you do in training is hopefully an indicator of what you can do in racing. Like, that's the goal. But also don't think that what people post on the internet is a good indication of what they're going to do in the race, because we see it all the time. People train like heroes and then, race average when you think that they might be absolutely crushing it. So we're all fit. We're all ready to go. I'm coming up on my world championship, so I'm getting fired up. And hopefully I gave you a little bit of an insight into, why the first part of my season seemed like a scramble and bashing my head against the wall a little bit. Now all of a sudden I feel like I'm clicking and things are happening, and looking to show it in my last two races of the season, in Marbella and Ironman Arizona. So I'm pretty excited for those opportunities. I just want to go show off all the work I've been doing. So thanks for everybody for tuning in, for following along, showing your interest. I do appreciate it. I understand that this podcast is a little bit different than maybe some of the other ones that are out there, where there's lots of people talking. And I've been playing with the idea maybe of having some guests on every so often, because I'm not always solo training. I'm not always out there on the bike exactly by myself, and or running or swimming by myself. So it is nice to mix things up with a little bit of company now and then. So playing with that idea a little bit, but right now all eyes on the 70.3 World Championships, and then Ironman Arizona. And coming back to you next week, I do kind of want to plan on breaking down that Marbella course a little bit, because I think it's going to make for a super interesting race with potentially a lot of fireworks, because there's a lot of places to risk it and a lot of places where, you can lose it all. So looking forward to that. Thanks everybody for listening again. See you next week.